All right, well, welcome to our first 7G training video. I have my lovely wife, Suzanne, with me, and we're talking about grace. Now, if you've got any church background at all, if you've grown up in church, you've probably heard this word grace, or at least you should have heard this word grace. But grace is sort of one of the bedrock foundational principles that we read about in the scriptures and that we see in the life of Jesus. And so with each and every one of these videos, what we want to do is we want to present the 7G, the growth concept. And so the 7Gs are just 7 principles that we believe that lead to and point to a growing Christian life. And so each week we're going to reveal a G. And so this week is grace. And so we want to reveal with each video, give you some knowledge about that thing, give you some convictions that come out of that knowledge, and then some things to live by that come out of those convictions. And so we're going to start with knowledge.
All right, nice. So with that knowledge, grace kind of goes along with grace. And along with that is grace is the foundational principle of Christian faith. Without it, you cannot have faith. And so the more that you grow in it, the more that you understand it, the more that you're going to understand the nature of God and who he is. And so with grace, it shapes our heart and our life and everything that kind of goes about being a Christ follower.
And so grace can just be generally defined as unmerited favor from God. And so it's the idea that because we have been given God's grace, God has given us everything that we could possibly attain. And we don't own anything, we don't have anything, nothing is ours, and nothing is really earned in light of God and who he is. And so everything that's good about our lives, all the things that we have, are all given to us out of God's grace. And when God sees us, because he's given us grace, he's not looking at us to perform. He's not looking and sort of weighing our actions, bad versus good, to see if he gives us his favor or his love. Because God's grace is freely given to us, it truly is a gift, and we cannot earn it. God's grace is unmerited, and it's favor from God.
So Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast."
So as we seek to answer important life questions like what makes me good, or what makes me loved by God, or why does God love me, the answer, as we see in the scriptures, does not come from ourselves. It comes from God and God's grace alone. And so whenever we have these sort of aha moments where God reveals something to us, or we reveal a need for God, that moment happens because of God's grace. And then from that point, it's not like we all of a sudden take the wheel back from God because we've accepted God as our Savior, or accepted Christ as our Savior. We don't then take control back and it's all on our shoulders. We still continue to live in such a way that communicates that everything we have, even our growth, even our Christian growth, our ability to move forward, is a direct result of God's grace. And so now that we have this sort of fundamental knowledge about grace, it ultimately leads us to a conviction or a belief.
Yeah, and so it's like kind of understanding what your place is in the world and where God's place is in the world. And it makes me think about just the book of James, how works brings us nothing. It's all about our relationship with God and the grace that he's given us by sending us his son. And that's the ultimate grace. And so following through with that is our job. It is our conviction to because of God's unmerited favor towards us, to show grace towards other people.
Right. And so once we have that belief, we know what grace is, and we out of this knowledge, this belief comes from. Then from this belief comes how we are to live. And so if we really understand grace, if we understand how much God has moved in our heart and our life, even when we didn't deserve it, even when we didn't ask for it, we get this sense that it brings us to this place of humility. And that's how we're called to live. That's a fundamental action step out of our belief of how we are to live with this knowledge of grace. We live humbly, knowing that God died for us at our worst moment, in our worst state, when we could offer him nothing. And so if grace is really a fundamental aspect of our hearts, it shapes the way we interact with people. It shapes the way and the speed in which we forgive people. It shapes our patience that we have towards other people who are not like us, or who disagree with us, or who maybe even dislike us. Grace becomes this driving force of how we reflect God's goodness. And it's because of God's grace that he's shown towards us. And so this is a fundamental aspect of our personal growth. And grace also, we never stop learning about grace, because there's something in us that always has this desire to work and to please and to earn things. And so part of the fundamental thing about Christianity is learning how to understand that that's not my job, that's not my purpose. It's not my purpose to earn God's love or trust, that I'm to accept grace, which is this unmerited, undeserving gift from God.